So the All Blacks have completed their first match of their Northern Hemisphere tour, 4 more to go, and there are some tough opposition just around the corner for the ABs, and in this video we're going to be trying our best to predict what Scott Robertson will be going with for his selection. Now, we did see the All Blacks send a few players over to England early, which does give us a little bit more of a hint about who will be selected, but it is myself and it is Tim from Rugbyitch. Mate, Japan, they were really strong in the first few moments of that game, pushing the All Blacks, but then as the match wore on, that was when we saw the All Blacks start to dominate that little bit more.
Yeah, no, Japan definitely had up a fight, for at least the opening, 20 minutes? But then from there, the All Blacks kind of took control of the game. And yeah, later on, we had 2 tries there from Ruben Love, which is kind of nice to see. And of course, Peter Lakai also getting a debut off the bench as well. But we'll have to see if those 2 names get floated about within this game or not. We'll have to wait and see.
Of course, a lot of strong players missing out in that game up against the Japanese, some seeing it as a bit of a trial game to see who would step up to the occasion. We saw about 7 different try scorers in that All Black starting lineup, so there's certainly a few players who have thrown their names into the hat, but we will start with the front row that we think Razor will go with up against the English. Who have you got at 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, so for me, I've gone with the likes of Ethan Groot at number 1, then Cody Taylor number 2, and Tyro Lomax at the number 3. I think this is kind of like the tight and trusty, front row that Razor started to like, and what we saw, of course, for that Rugby World Cup final back in 2023. So I'd like to think this is kind of the exact kind of trio we'll see in this game against England.
I've gone with the exact same 3: Ethan de Groot, Cody Taylor, Tyrell Lomax. I will ask you the question, though, out of those 3 who played up against Japan, Tamaiti Williams, Asafo Amoa, and Pasilio Tosi, out of those 3, who do you think put their name forward the best towards getting a starting spot?
I would say Tosi, actually. I think Tosi was pretty impressive, I think, for either 3. I honestly didn't think Tamaiti Williams was, amazing. I didn't kind of, recognize him as much. And to give credit to Japan, actually, I thought from a scrum situation, they were actually pretty impressive, actually, on the day. And the combination of Williams and Tosi actually didn't really work out in kind of the way that the All Blacks wanted. So maybe that's something they have in mind kind of going into this England game, if they were to use those 2 players off the bench, or even to maybe start one of them too. But I think Tosi was definitely the one that impressed me the most. But again, every player just needs a bit more minutes.
And we did see both props managing to get themselves the tries. And like you said, the All Blacks, they had a massive scrum going into this game, 950 or so kgs, about a 65 kg advantage over Japan.
Yeah.
But the Brave Blossoms weren't moving at scrum time, not until the later stages of the match when we saw New Zealand making some subs. So that was a little bit of a surprise. But at the same time, from seeing the Japan XV versus the Māori All Blacks, when the Japan XV scrum actually dominated the Māori ABs, did make a little bit of sense at the same time. But now we move on to the locking duo. Now, someone who stepped up majorly in the game up against Japan was the newly appointed captain for the All Blacks, Patrick Tuipulotu. Now, there is a chance that is only a one-off game, or perhaps every blue moon, no pun intended, that we do see Patrick Tuipulotu in that captaincy role in this game. I've gone back to number 4, Scott Barrett. I don't think that Derry had his best performance up against Japan. He had some really good moments when it came to the lineouts, but in terms of the impact that we saw from him off the bench up against Fiji, as well as the starts up against Argentina, I do think we saw just that little bit more from Derry overall. But then that was also maybe because of so many other players stepping up to that next level that he didn't really have to do too much, didn't have to get gritty and grindy throughout the 80 minutes. Number 5, I've gone back to Tupavai. Now, that is a bold call, because I do think Patrick Tuipulotu, in a normal world, he earned himself a starting spot for the All Blacks. But there are still question marks around the way that Razor thinks about his selections in terms of what we saw throughout the Rugby Championship. The combination that he backed most was Scott Barrett and Tupavai. So I do think that will be the combo that they'll go with up against the English as well.
Yeah, look, it's a tough choice. It's a tough choice, because you are right. I think Patrick Tuipulotu was definitely in my opinion, man of the match, I think, on that,
I agree,
in that Japan game. And yeah, he's just all over the place and definitely deserves, kind of, I think, a starting place actually in this side. And look, I've gone with Scott Barrett at number 4. I think he just has to be in here no matter what, get that kind of captaincy badge for him. But the number 5, I actually have gone with Patrick Tuipulotu. I actually have put him in. I think just for what I saw in that game, it was enough for me to say he deserves a place there. He won, I think, the ball like 3 times in the breakdown.
Yeah.
He got a try for himself. Was pretty good from a line-out standpoint as well. So I just think he did exactly what is needed. And again, it kind of maybe reflect back towards kind of the series we saw earlier on in the year, with the English in New Zealand. And I think that the kind of the lineouts, I think, was pretty even. I think you could say for both sides, and actually both sides actually worked pretty well actually from that standpoint. But I think Tuipulotu can just add a bit more dominance really compared to the likes of Tupuvai. I just think that's what he kind of adds, a bit more strength, kind of gains a lot more meters in the process. So that's why I'd like to see kind of Tuipulotu in there, but I wouldn't be surprised if Vai is the guy that Razor wants to go with.
With that last 20 minutes still being a little bit shaky for the All Blacks, do you feel that is a time that maybe Tuipulotu could bring that bit of experience and a bit of stability to this All Blacks side? As once again, we did see that bench struggle. Do you need those experienced heads, the cool, calm, collected customers near the end of the game, do you think? Or do you think Vai can play that role from what he did in the championship?
I would rather have Vai, I would rather have Vai off the bench because, one, yes, he's not as experienced, of course, as Tuipulotu, but the great thing about him is that he's also versatile and he can play that 6th position if needed. And with the way the All Blacks kind of have their team framed at the moment, with not as many kind of loose forwards to choose from, Tupuvai could be considered as a number 6 option in this case, and you could maybe have all 3 play at once if needed. So I can see maybe that as the better option, kind of having him off the bench, but at the same time, Tupuvai was pretty good throughout the Rugby Championship. So either way, I think they're not going to go wrong either way. I just think I'd rather see Tuipulotu get that starting place for what we saw in that Japanese game and Vai come off the bench.
And it's actually a great position for New Zealand to be in because we've got to remember last year they had a real lack of locks. There were a lot of injuries in that locking department. This year they actually have 3 in-form locks, like Scott Barrett. As critical as people were of him throughout the early stages of the Rugby Championship, I was, of course, one of them as well, I will admit it. But as the competition wore on in those 2 games up against Australia, he actually really stepped up. Yeah. And I'm going to ask you one more question before we move on to the loose forward trio. If you're having Patrick Tuipulotu in your starting side, as well as Scott Barrett, who's your captain? You giving it to Barrett still, or are you going with Tuipulotu 2 weeks in a row and maybe giving him a few more chances with that captaincy?
I'd be very surprised if Patrick is named captain for this game against England. I think Scott Barrett just has to be captain. And at the end of the day, when you have someone like, Artur Sevilla, Sam Cane, who else in the back line could be it? Like Beauden Barrett, if you put him in there. There's a lot of other players I'd put probably ahead of Tuipulotu, actually. But at the same time, if, the way kind of rugby works nowadays, a lot of the time, captains are actually in the forward pack. So it could come into his favor. So you never know. But I think just for now, I think Scott Barrett deserves it. And he'll kind of expectedly get that back.
And speaking of the forwards, we now move on to that loose forward trio. Now, we did see Samipeni Finau in action for the first time in a long time and actually had a really solid game up against the Japanese. Although stylistically, looking at it on paper, if he didn't do well up against Japan, I honestly don't know who he would have played well up against at international rugby. The game plan that the All Blacks used suited him perfectly. He was able to run the ball hard, scored himself a try. But are they going to go with him in the starting side up against England, a side that he did struggle with in July? Who have you got, first of all, in that number 6 jersey, then also in the rest of the loose forward trio?
Yeah, the way you put it, it's a pretty difficult decision. But for me, I thought it was pretty easy, actually. And I've gone with Wallace Atiti. I've just gone with Wallace Atiti because I think just for what he's shown us throughout the Rugby Championship and in that game against, kind of Japan, again, he did play a number 8 role, but still, he was pretty good on the day. I just think you have to have someone like him in your team. And yes, Samipeni Finau, he did actually have a pretty good game against the Japanese, but I don't think it's enough, unfortunately. I just think when you have a player like Wallace Atiti who's done so much already within this year, I kind of just want to back him and kind of back that youth, really. That's kind of like the direction I'm kind of going in. And I think Razor may go in that direction as well because, this is obviously a long-term project and we're only, in the first year of kind of the cycle before the World Cup. So I'd like to think he'll go with Wallace Atiti there in the number 6. And then, 7, I've gone with the experience there with Sam Cane, kind of balance it out. I think he had a pretty decent game actually against the Japanese. And again, with the number of options available as number 7, there's not as many you can choose from. Again, if I wanted to, I can go with someone like Peter Lakai, who I would like to see kind of play in that position. But it may be a bit too early for him to kind of get a starting opportunity here. So that's the reason why I think Razor will probably go with Sam Kane. And then, with number 8, it's simple as go with Otis Villa in the number 8 position. Just he's, on his day, he's one of the best players in the world. And, he's going to be my number 8.
Well, I've got the exact same 3. Wallace Satiti as my 6, Sam Kane 7, Artie Savia back as the number 8. I have to say Satiti has shown once again that no matter where you put him, out there on the field, he's going to give you 110%. That man is a physical ball runner, working extremely hard throughout the time he was on the field. Sam Kane, like you said, actually really having a good game here. Yes, there was that defensive error between him and the other Sam Derry, how they both looked at each other.
Just
the
like
Japanese number 8 went straight through Makesi. But overall, I feel like he had the type of game that people wanted to see from him heading into these important games, because he does seem like he's going to be the 7 with the amount of injuries that we've seen for the ABs. They're running low on stocks. There is the young option of Peter Lakai, but we did see him off the bench and didn't really have that standout debut that I was very much so hoping he would have. But we're going to have to wait and see whether he gets those minutes again. But it didn't seem to be a day for the guys coming off the bench, really. Like Ruben Love, this is going to be a very unpopular opinion. And it's great that he got himself the 2 tries, but I do also think that it was a little bit of right place, right time for Ruben Love there to be able to get those 2 tries.
The second one was very soft. It's a soft try, but hey, you took advantage of it and fair play to him. But I get that.
So I think with the exception of him, in terms of players off the bench, like Perenara didn't really make an impact. Harveli did what Harveli does, which was mess it up. Imagine that.
I love
see that cross kick?
Nick Berry
out on the wing.
We're going to talk about this.
It just sums up his form at the moment, unfortunately. But there is a chance he is going to be in this backline up against England. So we'll have to wait and see whether Razor selects him. But we will move on to that 9-10 combination. We saw Roygaard and we saw McKenzie. Now, Cam Roygaard, this was his first start in a long time, doing very well, scoring himself a try, keeping that backline flowing. Damien McKenzie. He has been the talking point yet again. That man probably gets talked about more than any other All Black at the moment. I'll be honest, it is unfortunate, because this was the type of game that he should have been able to really do extremely well in, stylistically up against Japan. And once again, it just didn't quite work. But I do think that is because they are still avoiding the Ratama-McKenzie combination. That is the one that makes the most logical sense. Yeah. It was worth giving it a try for Roygaard and McKenzie, but I do think they'll have to make a change here in that 9-10 channel. So I have actually gone with number 9, Cortez Ratama, number 10, Bowden Barrett. Now, that is nothing against... I've decided to switch both of them. And I do think that's something that Razor might consider. The one who's more likely to start the game up against England, I believe, is Cam Roygaard, if he was to keep either of those 2. But Bowden Barrett as the 10 option, I think, would be a great play here. We saw what kind of impact he had up against England in the July internationals. Cortez Ratama, he has been known as a better starter than a finisher in the game. So I do think that would work in the All Blacks' favour, having him start the match rather than coming off the bench. But yeah, it was just one of those games that once again we saw it kind of, a lot of the moves stopped when it came to that 9-10 combination, and a few fumbles from the back line as well. But still 10 tries. You can't be too mad at 10 tries, can you?
No, you can't. You definitely can't. And look, this 9-10 combination is difficult, but I think, we're thinking in the kind of the minds of Razor here, and I think he will just go with Roygaard and McKenzie as the 9-10 combination. That's what I've gone with here, and I think that's what he will go with. I just think Roygaard, I think on the day actually looked pretty good, but again, we have to also remember it was his first game, and there were definitely some kind of plays where I thought, okay, he's kind of getting to the swing of things. He could have made that pass better or something like that. But besides that, he had a pretty solid game. I think McKenzie actually had a good game, actually. I think it's not up there as a 9-10 game, but I think he had a 7-8 out of 10, in terms of what he did throughout the game. I thought, his kicking was pretty good as well. I think just he did everything kind of efficiently, really. And I think they want to try out this combination more, particularly in these Ottoman internationals. I think that's what they're going to really go for, because this is, I've said this a lot of times already, but this is the 9-10 combination, which I think Razor will build upon. I think Ratama actually, is a better player off the bench than Roygaard as well, because we've seen it within Super Rugby as well. We've seen it countless times, Ratama score tries off the bench. So I think there would be no problem for him making an impact off the bench with Roygaard, he's actually known for actually scoring tries really early in the first half. Well, that's like kind of like the season where he broke out. Actually, I think I can't remember the exact amount, but I remember there was a stat saying that he scored like over 50% of his tries in the first half, which was like it was something which I couldn't believe. I was like, wow, he actually is kind of just direct on that front. So there's something which I would like to see Roygaard start, but at the same time, I don't disagree with you there that Ratama McKenzie does kind of, obviously the chemistry is already there from club rugby, so it would make sense. It's just, yeah, it's a tough decision, but I think Razor will go with Roygaard and McKenzie again.
I'm just going to play a little bit of devil's advocate for a slight second here. McKenzie up against Japan, he had some good moments. But do you think England's rush defence will eat him alive? Because, of course, Japan, they were strong early on defensively, but then a lot of gaps opened up, and that was when we saw McKenzie start to really flourish in that game. Do you see England giving him that same kind of opportunity, or will they be able to shut him down from the get-go and stop that momentum?
I think they will, actually. I think England will give that, because I'm trying to remember of the games that previously England and New Zealand had played, but also just what we saw within, recently, but also even back the last time these two sides played at Twickenham. And I mean, I know it's not McKenzie, but there was the first try that Papali'i scored where he kind of just went straight through, intercepted the try. It's like a clear direct one. And even like the one where Caleb Clark passed the ball out towards Reiko and he kind of clear opening down the wing. There's moments where the England defense is kind of spread so wide that there's openings throughout the middle and also wide at times as well. So I like to think if McKenzie can find those spaces, which he normally does, that's kind of what he's known for, then he would be able to kind of penetrate that England defense. But yeah, look, England's a solid team. We all know this. They're a very capable team of, and they can definitely beat New Zealand on their day. So it's not going to be like a kind of a wide margin in this game. I can definitely see this being a close game, but it's just more McKenzie, man. I think it just has to be McKenzie's time. So I would like to think he'll stay there, but hey, you never know. You never know.
Very hard to predict what Razor will be doing. Midfield combination, I feel like this is actually where it gets very difficult. We've heard the rumour that Geordie Barrett should be ready to come back in, but do they risk chucking him in the deep end straight away, or do they go with something similar to what they went with up against the Japanese? For yourself, 12 and 13, who is the combo?
Yeah, look, Geordie Barrett, being available does make it a difficult decision, because I would just say start him right off the bat, because he is just that good of a player that if he just is a game changer. But I just think it's one of those where he hasn't played, because you also have to remember he didn't play against Australia in that second test, and he hasn't played against Japan, so he hasn't played in 2 tests now. So it would be a big call to kind of put him straight into the starting lineup. So for that reason, I haven't. I've actually gone with Anton Brown to start in this game. I think he had a decent game, I think, against Japan. I don't think he was amazing or anything, but I think he just did his job solidly enough where I think he's capable of playing that 12 spot, and we've seen it within club rugby as well. So Anton Brown is my number 12. Number 13 here, I've gone with Reiko. I just think it's one of those where Billy Proctor actually was pretty good on the day. I thought he had some. He got a try for himself. He made some. I think there was like one easy assist where he passed it out wide towards Talea, was it? Where Talea on that play was unbelievable. And then I think he got another assist towards Finau as well, where he kind of cut back in and scored the try on the left-hand corner. So overall, Billy Proctor actually had a pretty good game, actually, and definitely has put his name in the conversation, I think. But I just think if you're not going to play a player like Reiko in this game at all, then I think there's a purpose behind it. So I'd like to think that Reiko will probably start this game.
And I've got once again, same combination as yourself, number 12, Anton Lienert-Brown, number 13, Rico Ioane. Eventually, I do hope that we get to see Billy Proctor up against one of the top sides rather than the teams that they make up for the, I guess, second string opposition.
Exactly.
Now, that is nothing against Japan. That is nothing against Fiji. But in terms of where their sides are sitting in the world rankings, it does seem to be that they are much more happy putting Proctor in when it comes to a side outside of that kind of top 6 or top 5 rather than giving him a shot up against the highest teams. But Rico Ioane, I feel like once again the pressure is on. He needs to have some great performances here if he wants to keep a spot in the starting side. Anton Lienert-Brown, I really hope they don't switch Havili into the starting lineup. But
we know it's not going to happen, by the way. We actually know, but we definitely know it's going to happen. It's just, it's going to be...
But the good news is Barrett is back now, or at least should be back. Geordie Barrett, that is. So I would say if they're going to take Anton Lienert-Brown out of the side, it's going to be for Geordie Barrett and not for David Harville. But now we move on to the back three, where I do think we will see some changes compared to what we saw up against Japan. Number 11, I have gone with Caleb Clark. Number 14, I believe that they will stick with Sevu Reece. Like, once again, you know, he does fall into that category of not quite finding his form, although he was better in this game. And the thing is, up against Japan, in terms of that backline, a lot of guys had about 8 or 9 out of 10 performances. Sevu Reece still had probably a good 7 in this game. It's just the fact that there were a few other guys. Maybe Anton Linnett-Brown, you could argue, was a little bit lower, but overall, I think that Reece just needs to find one big game. And I think that Razor will keep him in that starting lineup until he finds it, similar to what he did with Rieko Ioane. And then number 15, this is where I've made the change. I've gone with Will Jordan. Now, I do think they would have had to make a change anyway. Steven Perofeta, now that I think about it, he was probably the guy who had the worst game out of the All Blacks backline. I think that he really never found his feet throughout the performance.
Yeah, he was very rusty, I'd say, in the game. Very rusty.
But then, understandable, seeing as he hasn't really played any rugby in quite some time. Caleb Clark out on the left wing. Now, Mark Talia, I thought, had a solid game for the ABs. One thing that does frustrate me a little bit, and I know that he does it because he's good at it, but get out on the wing. You know, there were so many times that the All Blacks shifted it out left and they'd have a forward out there who didn't quite have that same pace as Mark Talia because Talia was searching around that breakdown trying to become Cam Roygaard, rather than just letting him play the ball. And I think that was actually making Roygaard a little bit more flustered at times throughout that first half. He wasn't sure whether he was playing it or whether Talia was going to jump in and try and have a crack. But overall, like, you can't really knock the work rate of Talia throughout that last game up against Japan, wanting to get involved. But I do think with that kind of style, it's very similar to Sevu Reece, and I don't think you can have two wingers doing that same tactic, not against England anyway, or else you're going to leave gaps wide open on the outside for the English to run through. But for your back three, Tim, who have you gone with in these positions?
So yeah, similar to you, I have also gone with Caleb Clark as the number 11. I just think another similar towards Reiko. If you're going to kind of arrest a player just for the Japan game, then it's pretty likely that he'll start in this game against the English. And I think he has just kind of claimed the 11 jersey for himself. He is definitely the prime candidate for that position, I think, and definitely the automatic starter in my opinion. The 14, that's where it's a lot more up for debate because there's a lot of ways you can there's a lot of players who kind of fill that position really with Reece, kind of like you said, Martalea. You can put Will Jordan there. You can put, gosh, there's probably another player I haven't thought of yet, probably like Billy Proctor if you wanted to, shifting out wide.
Ruben Love now.
Even Ruben Love if you wanted to. Like there's a ton of players you can put there. So it's kind of one of those where that jersey is the one where I think it's really up for debate. And obviously with that, it kind of dictates what you kind of do in that 15. And in this side, I think Razor will most likely put Will Jordan at 14. I just think that's what he'll do. It's probably what I would want to do. I would like to see him as a 15, but I think Razor will kind of just revert Will Jordan back towards that 14 spot. And then for the number 15, that's where I've gone with Beauden Barrett. I think that's kind of like what you would expect as a kind of a Razor back three. Again, a lot of experience there, but also a bit of energy, really, with kind of Caleb Clark and Will Jordan offering you kind of they're kind of like two different types of wingers in a way, and kind of what they offer you with pace and kind of strength and kind of just kind of sheer power, really. But then Beauden Barrett obviously with the experience in the back. So I'd like to think that's kind of what Razor will think of. But again, I wouldn't mind seeing, Mark Talia in there if they want to kind of include him. But again, that's where like you would have to kind of shift a few players around, or Caleb Clark's just like the guaranteed one. He just has to be in there. He's like the automatic one. But the other two, you can kind of switch around a few players.
Yeah, I kind of expected you to go with Caleb Clark and then Mark Talia on that right wing. You have been asking for it for a couple of weeks.
I've been asking it for look, if they do it, I'll be so happy. But I just think you have to remember, guys, we're kind of trying to think of the minds kind of Razor here. So I have to go with what Razor will want. And I think he's more likely to go with Will Jordan at 14 than Mark Talia. So yeah.
Righty, so that is our starting lineups that we think Scott Robertson will be going with. We have now got the bench front row replacements for yourself. Who have you got?
Yeah, so off the bench as my replacement hooker, this is where I've gone with a sophomore more. I just think he had another player similar towards Anton Brown and I guess Ruben Love, where they did the job. They kind of just did their job, similar towards Perofeta I meant as well. But yeah, he wasn't like amazing, but at the same time, yeah, he's a better player than what I think George Bell will give you kind of in this game against England, and has a bit more experience than him as well. So he's definitely my replacement hooker. For the props, this is where it's pretty like you can kind of there's a lot of players that kind of fill this spot. And look, we did see Tamati Williams and Tossi as the combination against Japan, and I personally don't think that would work off the bench against England. I think that's one of those where I think they have to make a tweak there. Like either put like Fletcher Newell or put Opportunal Fassi, one of the two. Because I just think one of those two can at least add something different towards the side off the bench. But I've gone with what I think Razor will go with, and I have gone with Tamati Williams and Tossi as the replacement props there. So that is my replacement front row.
Mine is very similar. Number 16 is Safar Moore. Number 17, I have got Tamati Williams, although I was very close to going Ofa Tuanga Fassi, a little bit to that same extent as what you were saying, how the combination, it didn't quite work as well as they would have liked. So maybe just a little half tweak would make all the difference. Basilio Tossi, I actually do think in a Razor lineup, he is the more likely to miss out, and that he would more likely go Fletcher Newell and have that Crusaders combination in the props off the bench. But overall, I think that they've got some very decent options at the moment when it comes to those front row positions. It's just trying to find the combos. De Groot and Lomax, they've found one. It's just what is going to be that next best combo. That is the big question for the ABs currently. In terms of the other replacement forwards, for myself, number 19, I've got Patrick Tuipulotu, seeing as he wasn't in my starting side. And then number 20, this is actually where I've put Sama Penifei. Now, if they're doing well up against the English, you've got the opportunity of having a bit of a reshuffle. Perhaps you put Wallace Atiti into that number 8 jersey. Savia, he could go to 7 if needed. And then you put Sama Penifei at 6. But either way, I think that if the All Blacks can actually get themselves a decent lead, which I'm not saying is going to happen because we know how tough England can be, but if they can get there, you might as well rest a couple of those more experienced players heading into the next game only 7 days later up against the Irish, because you do not want to have any sort of injuries late in that contest for your main players. So that is why I've got those two that I have selected.
Yes, for myself, I've gone with, I guess, just the opposite to you here. I've gone with Tupou off the bench. And again, I explained the reasons why for that, because he can kind of cover that six position as well, which I think is kind of an added thing to it. And the reason why I think he's better off the bench in this game in particular. And with that, that's actually where I've gone with Peter Lakai to come off the bench as well, because he can cover that 7 and 8 position. So I think you have two players there who can kind of cover the least forward trio, and of course Tupou covering the locks as well. So I'd like to think that's kind of a way Razor can kind of go about it. I know in this particular case, it's probably one of the few selections where I think you probably could just go with Penifei and kind of just do exactly what you said. But I'd like to see Peter Lakai come off the bench here. And again, I'm only doing this because I'm thinking of like the long term in terms of games. And I would be surprised if Peter Lakai is going to get a starting opportunity against either Ireland or France. I can definitely see him getting a starting opportunity against Italy, I believe. But I think he needs at least to play. He needs to play at least 2 out of these 4 games. I see it. So I'd like to think he'll come off the bench in this game.
Righty. So Peter Lakai, of course, wanting to get himself a few more minutes, seeing as he is one of those guys brought in as injury cover. Of course, the AB's XV going to be in action this weekend as well, up against Munster. There will be players right on the verge of selection for the All Blacks. If there are injuries, the opportunity is there, just like it was for Lakai and Josh Law. But moving on to the back replacements now. For yourself, who are the players that are going to be able to change this game? Have you got the super sub of Ruben Love to come off the bench and do the double? Or have you gone with someone like a TJ Piranata? You need someone to lead the
I haven't gone with both of them. Unfortunately. I have gone with Corti Thatsma off the bench, like I said earlier on. I think he is just the player that can make an impact from a 9 position. 22. Now, this is probably the bold call. I think out of all the players I've selected here, and this is the one where I'm probably the most uncertain about. It's probably the one which I don't think will happen. But for the game and kind of the players I've selected, I've had to go with Stephen Perifetta at 22. I just don't think he had a strong enough performance against Japan. But for the way that, if you're going to have Bowden Barrett and McKenzie, I feel like you need at least to have a cover for them off the bench. So that's the reason why I've gone with Stephen Perifetta here. And again, even me saying that, I don't know if that's kind of the right call. It's either that or you go with what Razor will probably do and you put in David Avili. So I made the tough choice, but not really tough for me. I've gone with Perifetta there. And then for the last player, this is actually where I've gone with Jordy Barrett. So there's a reason why I haven't gone with Avili, because Jordy Barrett's there. And I think some way, if you're going to include him, at least come off the bench at least. So I'd like to see him play, get some minutes in this game, just so he's a bit more prepared for the kind of the next fixture against Ireland.
Okay, so I actually have 3 changes to yourself. Number 21, I've got Cam Roigard, seeing as I didn't start him in this contest. Number 22, I've got Damien McKenzie, seeing as I didn't start him in this contest. Number 23, I've got Mark Talia, seeing as I didn't start him in this match up against the English. So 3 guys that I feel could bring a real impact later on in the game. Now, Mark Talia could easily be switched out for someone like a Jordy Barrett, or if Jordy Barrett starts, I could see them having Anton Leonard-Brown as the number 23. Yeah. But overall, I do think Talia did enough to at least get some sort of opportunity against England here, because, you know, he just beats defenders for fun, and it's once he gets that defense right, they just don't seem to be able to stop him, which is a really handy thing to have.
Yeah.
And maybe
he's awesome.
That Razor will look at in the future as well. But nonetheless, we do thank you all very much for tuning in. Do let us know who you think Scott Robertson will be going with in his lineup up against the English. Now, even though they did announce their lineup on Tuesday last week, I believe it will be a Thursday this week that we do see the ABs being announced. And when they are, of course, we will have the video coming out on the channel as well. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and also be sure to check out Rugbyitch's YouTube channel. His link will be in the comments as well as the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and we will see you all for the next one.